Welcome back to Hot Flashes and Cool Topics. We are excited to welcome Alexandra Paul, the actress and activist, to the show. Welcome.
Thank you so much. It's so good to be here.
Well, we really appreciate you taking time to join us. And it's so interesting to go back and kind of look at your career. I had no idea you were such an activist all these years, but I kind of wanted to start a little earlier in the whole Stanford thing because I think you're the first person I've ever met that got accepted to Stanford and decided, no, I don't want to go there. So can we start back there? That's just shocking to me. I'm like, okay, can we
I
start
think
there?
it wasn't that I didn't want to go to Stanford. It was that I felt like, so I was accepted at Stanford. I went to quite a scholastically driven high school, a boarding school, Groton School. And I was actually ended up being the only person in my class who did not go to college. Everyone else went, all 66 of them, us. So I was accepted at Stanford, somewhere that I had wanted to go since I was like 11. I ordered the catalog way, way back because I was on a path and I thought I was going to be an environmental scientist, hence the activism that has peppered my life, my whole life. But I started modeling when I was 16 in New York City, and that led me to acting. I got my first job when I was 18, which flew me out to Los Angeles. And it was starring in a TV movie called Paper Dolls, where I played a model. So it was a very good transition because I had taken acting classes because my modeling agency had asked me to take acting classes so I could go on commercials, but I had no intention of um, modeling or doing anything else but go to college um, in a year. So when I graduated from high school, I took a year off to finish the modeling thing up, go to Italy and work there and New York City. And then I was going to go to Stanford. That was the plan, but best laid plans.
Right.
So, and I was excited about Stanford. I was very scholastically oriented as a kid. And it was important to my parents that I get a good education. They said, the one thing we can give you is a good education. And so, but when I went to LA and I starred in this TV movie, I really caught the acting bug, and I thought, as a lot of young people do, that I was old at 19, and that if I didn't, and in this I was sort of right, if I didn't seize the moment, that when I came back from college at 21, it might be too late, and maybe it would be too late because I hadn't been an actress who had studied for years and years and years. So I got a lot of work when I was 18 because I looked younger. And so I did work a lot between 18 and 21. And I did make a good foundation. I wrote to the school 3 weeks before I was supposed to show up. And the admissions counselor, whom I usually remember his name, started with an H. He wrote back to me and said I was throwing my life away by not
Oh my
coming.
gosh.
And I actually was and this was all by hand, by the way, because it was 1982. And I was touched that he took the time to write, actually, a
Yeah.
letter back.
Yeah.
And which is why I usually remember his name, but it has been 40 years, so forgive me. Um, anyway, so I did not go to Stanford. My identical twin did go to Stanford. First, she went to Georgetown, then she transferred to Stanford. And I remember being really envious, talking to her on the phone about the classes that she was taking and the interesting things that, college is great. It's an exciting time where you're surrounded by people your own age. I had been away to boarding school, so I didn't need to be quote unquote on my own, but I guess I was on my own anyway in LA. But yeah, so I was sometimes envious of her for being there, but I also knew that I wanted to be successful as an actress, and I feel that ultimately it was the right decision for me.
Yeah, I bet that man did not get very many letters saying that they're not going to Stanford.
He
Always
was like,
turning
are
it
you
down.
sure?
Yeah, that's probably why he took the time to write it. Like, what is this that I got?
That's why I had to start there because it was just such a unique story
Right, right, it
that,
is. Yeah, yeah. I remember Paper Dolls when it came out. I
right.
can remember seeing it.
Now, it
And,
was the TV movie, not the series. They made a series about it later.
okay.
But the TV movie was myself and Daryl Hannah, Eric Stoltz, some, very people who became very successful in their careers, and Craig T. Nelson, and I played my dad. So, yeah, but then there was a series, and they offered me the series, and I said no, because at that time in my 20s, I really had started doing feature films, and you didn't cross over easily from from television series to movies. So I did turn it down then, and didn't do series for a while until Baywatch, actually. So 8 years into my career, I decided to do a series, to actually to boost my film career. And so, yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
This is
and like you
exciting.
were in Christine, you were in, some of these movies like that. What was that like working on a scary horror movie like that?
Christine was my first feature film. It's a John Carpenter film, directed by John Carpenter, based on a Stephen King book, and it was a great experience. I'm not a horror film person. I don't go to them. I really, really like the fans, and I have to say that. So I shot that film in 1983. So 41 years ago. I still get more residuals from that film than any other project. And the horror fans are the most loyal and excited about your project. So I'm really proud of doing that feature
Yeah.
film. It's really held up.
Yeah, yeah, it's so funny how many my husband is a huge Stephen King fan. So
Ah,
yeah, so I said,
Mm.
well, she was in Christine. Remember, she was the girl in the car, and he's like, yeah, I remember that.
oh, well, you tell your husband hi and thank
I
you.
will, I will.
So you've done over 100 between feature films and television. Do you have one that you like better, movies or TV, or really interchangeable?
You know what's funny? And this is just such a lesson for me, who at very young had very firm ideas and beliefs. That as I said, I want to do feature films. So I didn't want to do television series. But when I did do my first television series, Baywatch, that is by far the most fun I have had. And also really creative, because you get to stay with a character for a long time. You get to work with the same people for a long time and develop relationships on and off screen. The crew gets very comfortable together. It's like going to a family to work every day. And I love doing that. And what I love about television, especially then when we were shooting in film, which took a long time. Like I remember doing a film with Jeff Bridges and Andy Garcia, and they'd say, okay, they'd shoot the wide shot, and then they'd say, go to your trailer and we'll call you in for your close-up. And it would be 2 hours that they'd be setting up the camera to get the key light in your eye and all this. And it would be so exhausting and kind of draining to have to wait. But in television, you don't wait. And certainly Baywatch, you did not wait. We were a low budget show that shot outside, so we didn't have to move lights around, and we didn't move locations a lot. So I loved shooting so quickly. It was really exciting.
Yeah, I read somewhere that someone said you were the one lifeguard on Baywatch that they thought could really save their lives. And that but you were a lifeguard, weren't you? And you're an EMT or certified EMT. So
I was at the time, yes, I was a junior lifeguard, and I was an emergency medical technician for 23 years. My sister, that twin who went to Stanford, she ended up becoming a firefighter at one of the first female firefighters in the San Francisco Fire Department. And she called me up one day and said, Alexandra, I think you want to get your EMT. We all have a hero complex, me and my brother and sister. We all want to save people. My brother is now a firefighter. So so I
oh,
did. I took the course and recertified for another 22 years, and never used it, but I have saved people. I did save my boyfriend when I was 18 from choking, and I took a Red Cross, CPR class in high school. And then
wow.
I have saved people in the ocean. So I am actually able to save people. Yes.
Oh my gosh.
But but on the show, of course, it was nice to have that, not have to think about trying to be a good swimmer when you already have a lot of swimming background.
Yeah.
So there are a bunch of stories that I've heard from Baywatch. I wanted to start with the fact that am I correct that the producer went to the same swim area and he saw you swimming one day and that's how you got connected?
Yes, we swam at the same pool in Pacific Palisades, California. He swam at like 6 a.m. and I came in at like 9, but he heard I never met him, but he heard I was a good swimmer. So he brought me into audition.
Which is
Okay.
great.
And you've done Ironman competitions, and now that, and was it, did I read like 11-mile swim or something like that?
So I
Like
just want to thank you all for doing research.
research. Yeah, we did do
Yes.
research.
You know,
Yeah.
It was
I'm not a
Mhm.
great athlete by any means, and I consider myself sort of okay at a lot of things. I was a very well-rounded student, which is probably why I got into Stanford. They were looking for well-rounded students back then. So I'm not great at anything, but I have to tell you that I'm actually kind of feel good about that because it made me work hard at to get it's like slightly good. And athletics is one of them. I just stuck with it. And I did do the Hawaii Ironman, which is a 2.5 mile swim, 125, 26 mile. Oh gosh, I'm
I can't
blanking.
remember the run or the
It's over
biking. Yeah.
120 mile bike and a marathon, which is 26-mile swim. And then
oh my
after that,
gosh.
when I injured my knee, I couldn't run anymore. So I started doing long swims. And the longest swim competition I did was 14 miles
Oh,
off the coast
okay.
of Mexico.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's
And I'm
crazy.
slow. I mean, I'm slow. I want to say that I did a 10-mile swim from Lanai to Maui, and I was the last swimmer in by a lot. In fact, I came in, and some guy who'd come in, it took me 9 hours. He'd come in at like 5 or 4 hours, and he looked at me, and everyone had taken down all the fancy signs and all that. No one was there but my beloved husband. And this guy who I think was maybe getting in the water for a dip after he'd had a nap. And he looked at me like, did you just finish? And I'm like, yes, I
I
did.
did it.
Because,
Yeah.
there's certain criteria that the world has, and being fast is sort of one of them. But I consider being in the water a long time also a criteria to be proud of. So anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up swimming on a swim team, like a summer swim team, not like all year round competitive. But that's hard. I mean, it just trying to do even the stamina, just keep going. That is really an accomplishment. So congratulations, gosh.
Yeah. I've
And
always been like slow and
Yeah.
steady.
this is
Yeah.
kind
The
of the
race.
undertone that you have is that you have a extremely strong work ethic. And that kind of shows in the fact that, okay, you're not in the race to finish first, but you're in the race. Like you're going to work hard to finish it. And has that carried through as you've gotten older, that work ethic is still as strong as it was when you were younger?
Well, I've been fortunate in that my work as an actress has allowed me to have breaks where I can be an activist too. So, but whenever I get a job, there's no doubt that because I've never felt myself to be incredible at anything, I've always believed that I have to control my controllables, meaning if you're an actress and you don't feel like you're the best actress in the world, at least you'll show up on time, know your lines, be kind to people, and have a good attitude. So that is worth so much. I mean, talent. I've seen so many people who are quote unquote extremely talented, but they're not disciplined. They come on the set and they don't know their lines, so they squander their talent because they're too busy trying to figure out the lines, or they're frazzled and late. So I've always felt like, they used to say, going back to school stuff, is that you get 200 points just from putting your name in on the top of the SAT test. If you just follow what is basically asked of you, you're already ahead of the game because so many people don't. So many people don't show up and just do what they're asked. And so because I think that is something that I've always felt is important, is to be reliable and follow through and do what you say you're going to do or hired to do. Yeah. So does that answer your question,
I
Colleen?
think,
No,
yeah,
it
I think
absolutely
yeah.
does. And I think I wanted to go back to Baywatch because it's so interesting to me that back when you were filming, and I was watching something on the documentary that came out recently, that you guys kind of not got I don't want to say teased, but it wasn't looked at the in the best light in Hollywood that you were on Baywatch at the time. But now it wouldn't make any difference. Now it's still watched all over the world and a billion views back in the day. What was it like to be on Baywatch when the other actors were like, oh, Baywatch? You know what I mean? Like there wasn't that, there was kind of a connotation of being, oh, it's Baywatch.
Um, a billion viewers a week, by the way.
Right.
And it was hard to be sort of laughed at for being on that show. I did take it a little personally. I think a lot of people, fans, people don't know you, think that it's okay to insult your work because you're quote unquote famous and maybe rich and you've got it all. So it's okay if they can make a snarky remark about being on Baywatch. Um, but it did hurt my feelings. I think I used to get a little defensive about it, which probably wasn't the best way to go about it. But we were teased, and I think I love being on the show because I knew that it was an underdog, and who knew, and because it was a great experience. Just the people were great. Saving people was just right in my wheelhouse, and you get to go to the beach every day, not have to wear high heels and lots of makeup. I mean, it was great. But it wasn't easy to be laughed at by Hollywood. And I didn't get a lot of the, A-list opportunities that someone might have been on if they were on ER, for example, another television series that was on in the 90s. So, but you know what? I am so grateful because I had such a great experience. And now it's true. Now Baywatch has had a movie done about it. It had a spin-off. It went for 12 years, if you include Baywatch Hawaii. It had several TV movie spin-offs. And it's played all over the world still on Pluto, and it's on Amazon. I mean, and now there's a documentary. I don't know any other television show that has had so much attention. And now you're right. It's been 35 years since I've been on the show, or 30 years at least. And people kind of think it's cool that I was on the show.
Right,
So
right.
you hang in there. It's kind of like the turtle, right?
Yeah, when you said 30 years, I was like, oh my gosh, it has been. It has been. That's the 90s. To me, when you say 30 years, I'm thinking, oh, the 50s. No, that's
Yeah,
the
right.
90s. Yeah.
I
And
get it.
the red bathing suit. I cannot think of another show where you look at one clothing item and you think you know exactly what that is. I
Oh,
mean,
that's interesting. Yes, you're so
yeah,
right.
yeah,
Uh, I I learned certainly at least one very important life lesson from being on that show. So I was cast, and I am built very athletic. I have a size less than an A cup. I am very straight. I have not big hips. I'm tall and I'm slender. I did not fit at all the Baywatch mold. And I went on that show the first year and I had hair about my length right now. And the second year, I think I realized, you know what? I can't be what they want me to be, which is this sexy thing. That's just not me. And so I cut my hair and I started lifting weights and I got more athletic looking and differentiated myself from the other women by being more myself. And it was such a huge lesson because what it does is that a lot of people would get a lot of the blonde women confused, but they never confused me. I was always, actually, even though it was probably only, maybe 2/3 of the time on the show did I have short hair, they always say, oh, the woman with short hair. Yeah, I know who she is. Or the woman with not a boob job, and so being myself was so, it taught me like, wow, I can be myself and it works out. I don't have to be what people want me to be, especially when I'm not going to be as good at it. I mean, you could give me breast implants and long blonde hair, and I would never be able to have that kind of sexuality that they wanted me to have. My sexuality and sensuality is completely different. And I just really grew up sort of honoring that and being authentic. And it was also part of actually my journey of getting over an eating disorder, was becoming more authentically myself.
right. And I think that would have shown through in your
Right.
character and your role, whatever you were trying to do. It would have come through that this
As
is an authentic.
inauthentic. You're right. It's
But yeah,
inauthentic.
but you are authentic in that role because you were more of you. That's interesting. And I'm curious about your activism. I'm curious. You talked about how you kind of always were one that really cared about the other person, kind of like empathy. When did this start, and how did this the paths that you chose for your activism, how did that come about?
My mother was somebody who she voted, she volunteered, we recycled, we turned off lights and we left her room. We just had a consciousness about others and the world. And maybe because she's British and she grew up during the war, for her it was a sensibility about not having had a lack during the war, where they had to be careful about what they spending energy and all that stuff. But for me, I took it as an environmental. It was like we did it for the environment. It was the 70s. And so I became really just conscious of the environment and also conscious of giving back. It was something that was always done in our household. And so I was really surprised actually when I got out in the real world that people didn't volunteer in their free time. Now I realize that, of course, they didn't volunteer in their free time. A lot of them have no free time, and that's why. But, my mother was not a working mom. She was able to raise us, so she had time to volunteer. But that was how my ethic came about.
And you've been consistent throughout your whole career and your life, being very passionate about your activism and being arrested but in peaceful protests. Is that, do you know, kind of going into these peaceful protests, which one could end up with you being arrested, or is it just a risk you take every time?
No, I was trained in civil disobedience, peaceful. Thank you for that.
No, absolutely.
Adjective, peaceful civil disobedience. And it is usually a conscious decision to get arrested. You either cross the line that a cop is going to ask you not to cross, or you do a sit-in when you know that you're being asked to leave. So it's has always been. Oh no, there was one that I didn't realize I was going to get arrested. And that was when I was just going, this was in the 90s during the AIDS epidemic, and gay and transgender, which wasn't very common then, people were, hit extra hard, certainly at the beginning in the United States. And they were asking for the drugs to be fast-tracked, that please don't take years and years to get us these drugs. We're dying anyway. So we want compound Q, I think it was called, and there was other drugs. And so I went, my friend asked me to go to a small gathering, I think on the courthouse steps, asking for the government to fast track these drugs. And all of a sudden, the police asked us to leave, but we had a right to be there. You can walk on a street. If you keep walking, you have a right to be there. And they came and they started to arrest us, and they put gloves on so that before they touched us, because everyone was so afraid of AIDS back then. They didn't really know. Well, I knew, so they should have known. But anyway, I don't know why they did that, but I've never been arrested where people put gloves on before they arrest me. But then, yes, I was arrested then because we did refuse to leave.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
I was going to ask, how do you know? Because so you said if you're moving, if you're walking, they can't because you're not blocking. How do they decide when they're going to say you got to leave? Or do you know how they make that decision if they're going to arrest a group that's peacefully protesting?
Well, it's usually, for example, so if you're just holding a sign and you're walking, that means you're not loitering, and so you're allowed to do that. It's freedom of speech, all that. But if you, for example, at the Nevada test site, which is where they test nuclear weapons, where I have been arrested over a dozen times at least, there is a line that you can't cross because you would be trespassing on federal property. And so when you cross that line, they arrest you. It's very civil. You stand there. There's a line of cops. One cop says, if you step over this line, you will be arrested. I say, sir, I need to protest the development of nuclear weapons because I worry about the state of the world, blah, blah, blah. And then I step over and then I'm arrested. So it's very civil. I have a lot of respect for the police. I really do. And as a white woman, I, of course, have been treated much better than a lot of people and different ethnic groups and things. Even men, it's tougher in jail, of course, than a woman. So, I feel as a privileged white woman, especially now that I'm over 60, I have even more sort of privilege because I don't seem threatening to cops in these protests, that it's a way I can protest. Everyone needs to protest in the way that they feel most comfortable with. I feel it's something I can do. And that, so I have been to jail, the longest I've spent in jail is 5.5 days. And, as a woman, it's a much better situation because women they're less violent, less vile. I mean, frankly, I am a heterosexual. I love my husband, but I have to say, women are the higher species. You're better than men. When I look at the news or when I look at, war and stuff, I'm like, you know what? This is all men. Look at them. They're all men.
Yeah. It's so interesting you said that. I went to Malcolm Gladwell had a book talk here in Nashville, and I went to it a few weeks ago, and he talked about boards, publicly held boards. He said, I will not join a board that doesn't have at least 3 women. And there was something in the tipping point, the revenge of the tipping point, about some boards that have too many men, just too much testosterone in that room. And he said, there's been just studies about having at least 3 women on a board, just things seem to get done. So, I have a husband too. I'm heterosexual. I love him dearly, but I have to agree. Yeah.
What in peacefully protesting, what is the hope that will, obviously it's not going to solve the solution, it's not going to be a solution instantaneously, but what is the hope in doing so that you will be a step closer to opening a conversation? To what is what is your reasoning for doing it?
It depends on the situation. A lot of times it brings more media attention to an issue because you're taking a step that a lot of people wouldn't take. So, and just by bringing media attention, you also show people, like I protested the Iraq War before it started and on the first day that we bombed. And most of my friends were for the Iraq War. Most of America was for the Iraq War because the lie that was being told was that Saddam Hussein was the one behind the bombings on 9/11. Now, I had been to some talks, so I understood that Saddam Hussein was not connected, but it got very, very messy because Bush, the president, had his own agenda and wanted to go into Iraq anyway. So I was protesting the bombing of Iraq because I knew, and I was later found to be correct, but most people didn't know that Saddam Hussein had nothing to do with it. So just being able to, just other people seeing that, oh, people are getting arrested and protesting the war makes them think, oh, maybe I don't have to just follow the line that I hear. So it just shows that there's other people that might not agree with the general consensus. When I was arrested for trying to stop the crushing of the electric cars, it was definitely for media because people didn't realize what was happening to electric cars in the early 2000s, that companies were crushing very well-functioning no pollution emitting cars, and by the hundreds. So that was another reason. At the test site, after we protested so much, I did go to jail once for protesting at the test site, but then it became too bothersome. It was too expensive for the government to incarcerate us and to give us a trial, etc. So they stopped. They didn't change their ways, but they heard us, and they had to change how they dealt with people who didn't agree with them. So in all my activism, though, Colleen, I have to say over the years that the only one that I've actually seen any big change, and my focus has been on environmental issues, peace issues, and animal rights, is that the only one that I've seen change is the electric car. And I was a pioneer in that I first started driving electric cars in 1990. And when I was trying to get the um, positive aspects of the electric car out into the public. People thought I was just a tree hugger, crazy tree hugger. And so but I have seen the evolution of that activism, and I'm proud to have been a part of that.
Yeah, I think bringing awareness, because like you said, there's a lot of people, like you said also earlier, just in other situations, we don't have time. A lot of people don't have the time to volunteer
Yeah.
or to do things. But when they come home or they watch the news or they see things in the media and they say, I didn't know that was happening. I didn't know that this would happen as a result. And I think back to when I was a child, like in the 70s. And now you see so much in the environment. You think about, oh my gosh, global warming is a scary thing. These are things that are happening. That wasn't really, I heard a little bit in the 70s about energy crisis, and I remember gas prices or something like that. But now the whole global warming and the whole taking care of the earth has really evolved. So I think just bringing awareness like that has done something.
Well, thank you. And I agree that any one person who speaks out, even if they touch just one person, that is valuable. And, but I want to say that you don't have to get arrested. You don't have to be in the streets. There's so many ways to be an activist by writing letters. I just wrote 2 letters today to my senators, by donating money, by, helping raise money. There's so many ways of being an activist, and you don't even have to be an adversarial activist against something. You can be, I now walk dogs at my local shelter for 4 hours a week. I mean, there's things that you can do that just help your own backyard, which is super important.
That's so true. And I hope people hear that, because sometimes they think it has to be some grandiose thing that they do. And it really can be just small steps that turn into bigger steps that help so
Mhm.
much more. So thank you for
Yes.
all that you're doing with that.
What is it?
Right.
Act locally, think globally, act locally.
I think
That
that's what
was
it is.
And it's true. It's like voting, for example. People
Right.
often don't vote in the local elections, but oh my gosh, not only those the people that then ascend to bigger, higher offices, but also that affects so much, so important.
Oh yeah.
That
We know.
we,
Yeah. Where we
we live
live,
in
we
Tennessee.
know.
We're acutely
We
aware
know.
of a lot.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so you recently, like you said, you're 61 and you recently entered your 60s. We have talked to so many women who have found this stage of life to be kind of a fresh, open-eyed, I can kind of create my reality. Have you found that in your 60s?
The best thing about getting older, one of the, yes. Yes, I have. And I like getting older. Um, I, my sister, my twin, who I have referred to before, is now a writer, and she just wrote a book called Tough Broad about how, and she interviewed women from 50 to 93, about aging and being outside and active and aging well that way. And what she found in her research, not just by talking to real women, but by researching stats and things, is that find that the 60s decade is their happiest
I've
if
heard
you're
that.
healthy.
Yeah.
A lot of that has to do, of course, that the kids are out of the house and hopefully in their own lives. And then you might be thinking about retirement. Those things don't apply to me because I do not have children, and I am, still, I'm hoping to act, although I am on hiatus right now taking care of my mom. So I don't consider myself retired, but what I feel is that invisibility that comes with getting older for women can be great. If you once the pain of being invisible you've gotten used to it, you can go, wow, this is like a superpower.
That's what we
Because
Oh,
say.
nobody
Colleen
cares.
says
I
that
said
all the
that all the
time.
time. It's like a
Yeah.
superpower.
It's superpower. Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah, nobody really cares that they're not looking at you. So you can do whatever you want and you don't have to worry. Yeah, and you stop worrying about what they care about anyway, what they are
Right.
thinking anyway. So
Right.
Yes, as long as you can stay healthy, I think that's
Right.
important. And I'm really lucky that I have an amazing, amazing partner of 29 years that we're still very much in love. And so it's really lovely to age together. We kind of, we just love being together. And so yeah, I
Yeah.
don't I don't know how it is on the market. If I was out there looking for a new partner, I don't know how that would be.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we've been married
We
32 and
33
33 years. So
years.
Ah,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
we get
Yeah.
it. We
Yeah. We
get
get
it.
it.
And
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
just, and it's a beautiful thing to see your face just light up when you
Light
talk
up when
about
you
him.
talk about him. Yes,
So
it totally did. So we
that's
can tell. Yeah. Right through
what
the,
would you, I know you're right now taking care of your mom, which a lot of us are going through, and so we can definitely understand. But what is your hope for your career going forward? Do you find that you still want to continue acting, or maybe even take on like producing or something like that? What do you see the future for you?
Yeah, I would definitely like to continue acting. I have dabbled in producing. It's not my favorite thing. I really like acting. And so that's what I would like to do when I still audition, but I really can't I really can't go on a lot of auditions because I need to be here with my mom. She's at a stage where she needs my husband and I to go in 4 times a day, and she still lives in her home. We're trying to keep her in her house, and soon that will be even more. And so I don't feel good leaving it to my husband or even my sister. We are planning a vacation, and my sister's going to come up, and we've hired somebody, so it's very planned, but it takes a lot to leave. And so since I'm fortunate enough not to need to work, I am choosing for the most part not to.
I know that you struggled with bulimia for a long time and you're healthy now. What would you say to that young version of you that was struggling and really in kind of that dark place? What would you say now to her about your health and your wellness?
Yeah, I became anorexic when I was 16, and then that transformed into bulimia, which is binging and purging, because it was easier to hide. And I just had an insatiable desire to eat, and then to binge, not just to eat, but to binge. And then at 28, so from 16 to 28, I struggled with that. And by the way, I would not have taken Baywatch if I had still been um, bulimic, because it would have been too stressful to be in a bathing suit and having to deal with, when you're bulimic or any kind of addiction, it starts off as something you're using it to try and solve a problem, usually an emotional one, and then it becomes the problem,
Mhm.
right? So it no longer solved my emotional problems. I thought it did, but it really was just became this habit that yeah, it became a habit that was bigger than anything I was trying to solve in the first place. And as I discovered, and I mentioned earlier, was that one of the big issues for me was that I was trying to please everybody else and not myself. So I used food to treat myself emotionally and to fill that hole. I literally felt a a pain in my chest, an irritation in my chest that I needed to smother with food. And that's why the binging. And then the purging came because it's sort of a relief from it. So it was a very destructive habit, but I was able to have a career with it. So it's a functioning habit. Um, and so I had stopped by going, I'd been in therapy the whole time, but I stopped by really going to a 12-step program. And within a month, I stopped the behavior. And by doing the 12 steps and along with the therapy, I was able to grow and change my mindset. Um, I really credit the 12-step program, though, for really getting me into action to stop, whereas therapy got me to know myself and why I was doing it. It didn't actually galvanize me to actually take steps to stop the behavior. And I guess I would have said, I don't know. It's so hard for me to know because it was so much a part of me that, well, for one thing, it doesn't keep your weight down. So that was the reason I thought I was doing it, but It doesn't. And so if I only could have dealt with the feelings and really dealt with the feelings, then I wouldn't have had to exhibit that behavior. So it's really not what you're eating, but what's eating you. And that's what I should have really paid attention to. I remember telling my therapist, no, 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 I'm fine. It's just that I eat too much. I can't help it. I really want to binge. So help me stop pinching. And she'd be like, well, let's look deeper. And I had a lot of resistance to that.
Right. Yeah. And I you know, I was I was bulimic as well. I was not as long as you were, but I was from like 16 till probably like 20.
Mhm.
Um, and it was weird how I stopped. It was just like kind of a weird, almost a cold turkey thing. I think I saw my grandfather, not bulimic, but dying and suffering. And I thought, what am I doing? And so, you know, why am I doing this to myself? And so I stopped. But it was like you said, it doesn't help you. No, it doesn't help you lose weight. I was all over the place, you
Right.
know, when that was happening. But it's an odd time. And like you said, feeling trying to fulfill some external expectation of you. And yeah, that just didn't cut it. But it's a tough thing. And I think probably, especially you were a model and you were in acting, and those expectations had to be really a lot of pressure on you.
It's funny because going from modeling to acting felt like a weight off my shoulders in terms of my body, because I am not a heavy person. And back then, being thin was really in, not the bodies of today, which are more diverse and also more accepting of roundness and actually celebrate roundness. That was not at all what was going on in the 80s and 70s. So it was I mean, I like to blame it. I would like to blame it on the pressures of acting, but it really was the fact that I wasn't being authentic. And like so many girls who aren't in acting get bulimic, right,
Right.
Bridget? So
Right.
it's really that I wanted to please everybody. And that wasn't, and as soon as I started saying no, no, thank you, I don't want to do that, and realizing that people really didn't care what I said, I wasn't that important to them that they would like their life would end when I didn't want to do what they asked me to do. That I stopped. I was able to stop throwing up. And most importantly, not necessarily stop, but I stopped having that feeling in myself that caused me to binge.
Right.
So so it was really, yeah, that's a long-winded question, answer. Sorry,
No,
Colleen, to your
No,
question.
but I
no,
think it's
but it's
helpful.
yeah,
I think it's
and I
helpful.
think
Yeah.
so many women, I mean, I have a daughter who went through it, and watching her go through the journey, there's just so much pressure, especially with social media now. There's just
Oh
so much
gosh,
pressure. So I
Hmm.
can't
I'm
even
so glad.
imagine. Yeah.
Right.
I'm really good. That's another good reason, good reason to be 61 is that we grew up in a time where which I
Mhm.
feel was more fun
I
too. Like
know.
we hung out with people and
Yeah.
and just didn't have time that we spent. I mean, television was considered the big evil thing back then.
Right.
And I didn't watch, I never had a television, so I didn't even really watch. So just a lot of, yeah, I'm glad that I didn't have the pressures that kids have today.
Right.
It's hard. It's that instant gratification that's just so hard for them. And
Yeah.
gosh, thank you so much for coming on. This
Yeah. Same
conversation has
here.
been wonderful, and
Mhm.
we will make sure to have the link to your podcast in the show notes. So
Thank you.
Alexandra, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me. I'm so pleased to talk to you, and best of luck
Well,
to you
thank
both.